Welcome to the Delmarva Almanac. Each week we connect you to the best of Delmarva. Like other almanacs, our aim is to tell you a little bit about our past, our present, and events in the near future. I'm your host, Dana Kester McCabe. Keith Whitelock may be the quintessential traditional Eastern Shore artist. His subjects include the boats, marshes, and hunting decoys which represent the life of Delmarva's watermen. He has lived his whole life here on the Eastern Shore.
We weren't right on the water, but we were close enough to it. I mean, I could hear the boats at night coming up and down the river, see the spotlights cast in the sky where they were kind of searching out the day markers and things. And I guess I have to classify myself as being somewhat mechanical. And there's something about boats and airplanes that just fascinated me. I like the details, and so I'm interested in how they're rigged and what line does what on the boat. So as much as I can learn that and apply that to the work, I try to do that.
Keith's attention to detail extends to building models of boats and buildings that he can work from in his studio, but mostly he works from his own photographs, using his imagination to add things or eliminate unnecessary details to refine the composition and using colors that are true to his vision of the scene.
It's probably a somewhat limited color palette. I tend to like the more natural, I'll call them the more warm blue colors that we would get, that you see here with the cerulean blue sky, and that I think in terms of artist colors, tube colors, if I have to describe them. So you end up with sort of this phthalo blue, Prussian blue color in the water quite a bit. And the other big collection of colors, and that's a generous term because when you colors you think of all the bright reds and golds and greens and things. And of course we do get a lot of green, but I use a lot of earth colors. There's a lot of various browns, yellow ochres, it's sort of brownish yellow, beigey colors. Sometimes when I actually finish the work, I'm thinking, well, it's in color, but there's very few colors here. I mean, and I've done a number of paintings that with a very limited palette where I limit myself strictly to browns, reddish browns, and golds, and they come out with a sepia tone look. And that, again, since I'm dealing with something that's unfortunately becoming a nostalgic sort of genre, it's appropriate. They look like old sepia tone photos somewhat.
Keith went to the University of Maryland, but credits most of his education to studying other artists like Frank Frazetta and N.C. Wyeth.
And of course, they were considered illustrators, and I loved that stuff. And that sort of moved me into oil painting because I wanted to try to do that, but my choice of subject matter happened to be some of the old boats and marshes. I unintentionally transitioned into watercolors probably 20 years ago, and I did the world's worst watercolors when I first tried to take these up. Friends of mine were painting watercolors. I loved that freshness, and I thought, well, I can do this. And after I tried it, I was just really put in my place. I thought, well, I don't know what's wrong, but I can't paint watercolors. And I think over a period of years, and this is where I have to give credit to other artists, as I studied literally every book in the library, and then I would encounter these other watercolorists again, I began to see, oh, I see what he's doing here, I see what he's doing there, and oh, I know how that works. And after a while, I got comfortable with the watercolors. So I got so comfortable with them, I just kind of kept painting these things, and the next thing you know, I end up becoming a watercolorist myself and a watercolor instructor, and the oils kind of languish in the background.
Watercolors are often judged on adherence to specific techniques, which Keith generally follows. Here's
a little miniature of a workboat going out, and you notice there's just a blank white void in the middle. So that's my white paint. I really, as a transparent, I try to be a traditionalist with transparent watercolor. I have no white paint to fall back on, so these whites have to be saved. And once you've accepted that mentally, that's how you approach this picture, to save the whites and go carefully about it, and then try to get some darks in early on so that you're not dealing with this little fugitive ghostly image all the time. The watercolors will work pretty good for you. In this case of the little boat I just mentioned, I painted around the boat. Sometimes I do have to use the masking fluid. Like if I'm doing an old dock and I've got just tons of little pilings and I want the water lines consistent, it's easier to mask those out, paint the water lines in, and then pick it up. So it's a sort of a case-by-case situation. I do both frequently. I'll paint around some areas and there'll be areas of masking fluid. And then sometimes for a transparent watercolorist, I really have to commit the big sin of using a little gouache. And the problem with gouache is if you use very much of it, it jumps out at you. It doesn't reflect light the same way. It looks like a repair of some kind. Unless you're very, very careful with it, and you have to use it in a few places because painting grasses and things, you do always have that lighter bit of grass just coming over a dark shadow. And with watercolor, you can't always save that little fresh brush stroke out with masking fluid. There are tricks. I'll scratch it out later, and sometimes a little tiny rope. You'll use a touch of gouache. Watercolor is great. It's all dry in 5 minutes, and if you mix any 3 colors together, you get the same mud. So you have to be careful about them in terms of keeping them fresh. So you get a couple. You paint directly, you get in, and you get out. And so I tend to be distracted. I wish I could say, oh, I get up every day at a certain hour and I paint the same things, and I get bored too easily. Sometimes even on these small ones, I feel like I know what I'm doing, but my mind starts wandering. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should work on the other thing, and that's why I have 3 paintings going at the same time now.
Keith advises artists who are just starting out to find their own niche.
I think you do have to specialize and become known for something, and for sure something that you're interested in. And the arts and crafts shows are a good way to at least get your foot in the water and see how will the public respond to what you are doing. Are they interested? And from there, you will have to try and seek other forms of exposure through galleries, perhaps.
Keith could be considered an historical painter, as he tries to capture fleeting moments of time in our region's culture.
I think one of my first subjects was an old working boat abandoned in the marsh down around Deal Island. And I'm not sure what was so attractive about the boat. The boat still had those really pretty lines of a boat, but it was this mixture of textures. That old white lead paint was still so bright white and unblemished in some places, and then in other areas it was flaking off in sections. It looked like potato chips, and you had rust stains, and the natural wood had turned gray like driftwood. I just loved that mix of colors and textures, and I wanted to kind of capture that boat before it was gone. I knew it wouldn't be around forever, but it still looked really cool in the marsh. It looked like it belonged there, which is, I think I've mentioned that. I think as an artist, that's my job sometimes. Everybody doesn't appreciate the things that I think are neat, but every drawing or painting, I'm sharing, in effect, something that I think is interesting or neat. It's like, look what I found. Look how neat this looks. There's something about these just old working boats in the old shanties, again, that's it's not all artificially prettied up. It's the way it is. And even the old irregularity of the docks with different sized boards and pilings. In some places they were heaved up and down from the winter when the ice would push and pull these things. I just thought these were just very cool images, cool things, and that's what I wanted to draw and paint. I never realized early on how quickly these boats and things would go away. I mean, there was a certain aspect of maybe being a waterman or how these watermen's villages looked from the 30s up through even beyond after World War II. You have a choice now. A young man growing up in one of these communities, he can just as easily go into the tech industry now as he can decide to shed soft crabs like his grandfather did. So all of my subject matter is disappearing. That's going away in leaps and bounds.
Keith recently had 2 of his watercolors reproduced as wall murals at the new restaurant Buster's Seafood Grill in Salisbury. Go to our website to get a link to Keith's Facebook page and to his popular watercolor demonstrations on YouTube. Well, that's all for this edition of the Delmarva Almanac. We'd like to thank our community partners, the Friends of Delmarva Public Radio, the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, and underwriters, eatdrinkbuyart.com, for their help in bringing this program to you, our audience. Our theme music was provided by Brightside Studio. This show has been a Moonshell production. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, may the rhythms and tides of Delmarva bring you good fortune.